Raymond Williams's The Country and the City is a seminal exploration of English literature, social history, and the contrasting ideals of rural and urban life. Through this book, Williams delves into how literature reflects and shapes our understanding of the rural countryside and the evolving city. This juxtaposition goes beyond mere location, symbolizing deep-seated values, class conflicts, and economic transformations. Williams's analysis unveils how English literature often idealizes the countryside, depicting it as a pastoral paradise, while the city is portrayed as a site of modernity and corruption. By examining various literary texts from the English canon, Williams reveals the underlying socio-political tensions between rural nostalgia and urban progression, offering readers a complex and critical perspective on these contrasting spaces. Williams opens his argument by examining the pastoral tradition, a genre that celebrates rural life and glorifies its simplicity and natural beauty. This literary tradition often casts the countryside as a harmonious and idyllic place, free from the harsh realities of industrialization. However, Williams exposes the pastoral ideal as a form of escapism, concealing the social inequalities and labor struggles prevalent in rural areas. The pastoral genre, he argues, was primarily crafted by elite writers who viewed the countryside through a romanticized lens, often ignoring the lived experiences of the rural working class. For instance, poets like Philip Sidney and Edmund Spenser, prominent figures in the pastoral tradition, constructed rural landscapes that are symbolic rather than representative of reality. Williams critiques this literary tradition for obscuring the socio-economic issues facing rural laborers, such as exploitation and poverty, thus maintaining a cultural narrative that benefits the upper classes by promoting an illusion of rural harmony. As industrialization spread across England in the 18th and 19th centuries, urban areas expanded rapidly, resulting in significant shifts in the social and economic landscape. Williams argues that literature from this period reflects the anxieties and transformations brought about by these changes. The city, once peripheral in literature, becomes a central theme, embodying the complexities of modern life. While the countryside continues to be romanticized as a place of innocence and simplicity, the city is increasingly depicted as a space of alienation, moral decay, and social upheaval. In works by authors such as Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell, the city is portrayed as a site where traditional values are eroded by industrial capitalism. Williams contends that these portrayals reinforce the divide between rural and urban spaces, creating a dichotomy where the countryside is idealized and the city is criticized, reflecting broader societal fears about the impact of industrialization. However, Williams also points out that not all writers fall into this binary view. Some, like Thomas Hardy, depict the countryside not as an idyllic refuge but as a place marked by hardship, struggle, and loss. Hardy's novels, set in the fictional region of Wessex, illustrate the harsh realities of rural life, including poverty, social isolation, and the impact of agricultural decline. Through Hardy's works, Williams demonstrates that literature can serve as a powerful medium for critiquing romanticized notions of rural life. By highlighting the struggles faced by rural communities, Hardy challenges the pastoral ideal and offers a more nuanced perspective on the countryside. Williams argues that this shift in literary representation reflects a growing awareness of the social and economic hardships experienced by rural laborers, challenging the notion of the countryside as a timeless and unchanging space. In contrast to the pastoral ideal, Williams discusses the concept of the knowable community, a term he uses to describe small, close-knit communities where social relations are personal and transparent. This concept is often associated with rural life and contrasts with the anonymity and alienation of the urban environment. Williams suggests that the knowable community represents an ideal of social cohesion and mutual support, qualities that are often lacking in the modern city. However, he also critiques this ideal, arguing that it can mask social inequalities and limit individual freedom. In some literary works, the knowable community is depicted as a restrictive space, where social norms and expectations constrain individual autonomy. Williams's analysis reveals that both rural and urban spaces have their limitations, challenging readers to reconsider simplistic notions of community and belonging. Williams's critique extends to the role of land ownership and class structure in shaping the countryside. He highlights how the English countryside has historically been controlled by a wealthy landowning class, whose interests often conflict with those of rural laborers. This class divide is reflected in literature, where landowners are frequently portrayed as benevolent figures, while the hardships of rural workers are downplayed or ignored. Williams argues that this portrayal serves to justify the social hierarchy, perpetuating the idea that rural society is naturally harmonious and hierarchical. By exposing the economic interest underlying these literary representations, Williams challenges the idealized image of the countryside as a place of social stability and moral purity. He shows that the pastoral ideal often conceals the exploitation and oppression faced by rural laborers, reinforcing class divisions and perpetuating inequalities. In the latter part of the book, Williams examines the relationship between literature and social change. He argues that literature has the power to shape our perceptions of rural and urban spaces, influencing how we understand issues such as poverty, inequality, and social justice. By portraying the countryside as an idyllic refuge from the corruption of the city, literature can obscure the social problems facing rural communities and discourage efforts to address them. Conversely, literature that depicts the harsh realities of rural life can raise awareness of these issues and inspire social change. Williams believes that literature should strive to represent reality more accurately, highlighting the struggles and inequalities faced by marginalized communities, rather than perpetuating idealized myths. Williams's The Country and the City is not only a critique of literary representations, but also a broader analysis of the cultural and historical forces that shape our understanding of rural and urban spaces. He emphasizes that literature is a product of its historical context, reflecting the social, economic, and political dynamics of its time. By examining how different authors represent the countryside and the city, Williams reveals the changing attitudes toward these spaces and the values they represent. He argues that literature has the potential to challenge dominant cultural narratives, offering new perspectives on issues such as class, community, and social justice. In conclusion, The Country and the City is a thought-provoking work that encourages readers to question the idealized images of rural and urban life perpetuated by literature. Williams's analysis demonstrates that these representations are not neutral or objective, but are shaped by the economic interests and social values of the time. By exposing the contradictions and complexities within these literary depictions, Williams challenges readers to think critically about the ways in which literature reflects and shapes our understanding of the world. His work remains relevant today, as issues of rural decline, urbanization, and social inequality continue to shape contemporary society. Williams's insights remind us that literature is not only a reflection of reality, but also a powerful tool for shaping our perceptions and challenging social injustices. Through The Country and the City, Williams offers a nuanced and critical perspective on the relationship between literature, society, and space, encouraging readers to consider the social and political implications of literary representations of rural and urban life. 4. You said Problems in Materialism and Culture. Raymond Williams, book note 1,200 words without subtitles. ChatGPT said. ChatGPT. Raymond Williams's Problems in Materialism and Culture is a groundbreaking collection that brings together his key essays on cultural theory, Marxist criticism, and literary analysis. Williams, a leading figure in cultural studies and socialist criticism, uses these essays to explore how cultural forms are both shaped by and can shape material conditions. By interrogating the ways that culture reflects, reinforces, and sometimes resists the structures of society, he offers readers a nuanced understanding of culture as a site of struggle, where different ideologies, values, and social forces compete for dominance. This book provides valuable insights into the intersections of culture, ideology, and materialism, challenging readers to consider the role of culture in social change. One of Williams's central concerns is the relationship between base and superstructure, a concept foundative to Marxist theory. In traditional Marxist thought, the base or economic foundation of society, its productive forces and relations of production, determines the superstructure, which includes culture, ideology, and social institutions. However, Williams argues that this model is overly deterministic, failing to account for the complex interactions between the economic base and the cultural superstructure. Rather than seeing culture as simply a reflection of economic conditions, he proposes a more interactive approach, suggesting that culture both shapes and is shaped by economic structures. This view allows for greater agency within culture, recognizing its role in potentially reshaping social relations. For Williams, culture is not merely passive. It is an active process that can challenge and transform the dominant ideologies imposed by the ruling class. In Problems in Materialism and Culture, Williams introduces the concept of cultural materialism, which he defines as the study of cultural practices in their historical and material contexts. This approach seeks to analyze culture not as a separate or abstract entity, but as something embedded in specific social and historical conditions. Williams critiques approaches that treat culture as a static or ideal realm, detached from the realities of social life. Instead, he views culture as a dynamic and evolving field, shaped by the contradictions and conflicts of its time. Cultural materialism thus enables a deeper understanding of how cultural forms express, contest, and sometimes subvert the ideologies of their time. By emphasizing the material conditions that give rise to culture, Williams's approach challenges readers to consider how cultural products, whether literature, art, or media, are implicated in power relations and social structures. A recurring theme in Williams's work is the role of ideology in shaping cultural production and consumption. He argues that ideology operates not only through explicit propaganda, but also through everyday cultural practices and beliefs that reinforce the status quo. This subtle operation of ideology is what Williams calls hegemony, a concept he develops alongside, though somewhat distinct from, the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci. For Williams, hegemony encompasses the ways in which dominant groups maintain their power by shaping the norms, values, and expectations of society. Unlike overt forms of control, hegemony works through consent rather than coercion, making it a powerful and pervasive force. Williams's analysis of hegemony reveals how cultural forms often reproduce existing power structures, presenting certain social arrangements as natural or inevitable. However, he also emphasizes the possibility of counter-hegemony, where alternative cultural forms and ideas can challenge dominant ideologies and offer visions of a different social order. Williams's critique of traditional literary criticism is another significant aspect of problems in materialism and culture. He argues that much of literary criticism has been confined to a narrow focus on aesthetic form or individual expression, often ignoring the social and historical contexts in which literature is produced. For Williams, this approach is inadequate because it isolates literature from the material conditions that shape it. He calls for a more socially grounded criticism that examines how literature reflects and engages with the issues of its time. This method, which he terms cultural analysis, involves looking at literature as a form of social production, a medium through which the conflicts and contradictions of a given period are expressed and negotiated. By situating literature within its socio-economic context, Williams believes that critics can better understand its ideological function and its potential for social critique. Williams also addresses the concept of realism in literature, a topic he explores with great nuance in this collection. He contends that realism should not be seen merely as a style or technique, but as a way of representing the complexities of social experience. For Williams, realism's value lies in its ability to depict the contradictions and struggles of everyday life, making it a powerful tool for social critique. However, he is critical of simplistic or deterministic forms of realism that reduce social life to rigid formulas. Instead, he advocates for a realism that acknowledges the fluid and dynamic nature of social relations, capturing the ways in which individuals and communities negotiate and resist dominant forces. In this way, Williams sees realism as an ethical and political project, one that can illuminate the experiences of marginalized groups and challenge prevailing ideologies. In discussing language and its role in cultural production, Williams highlights how language functions as both a tool for communication and a site of ideological struggle. He argues that language is not a neutral medium, but a socially constructed system that reflects and reinforces power relations. By examining the ways language is used to define and categorize people, places, and ideas, Williams shows how it can shape perceptions and influence behavior. He is particularly interested in the ways that language can be appropriated by different social groups to advance their interests or resist dominant discourses. Through this analysis, Williams emphasizes the importance of critical engagement with language, encouraging readers to become aware of how language shapes their understanding of the world. Another important contribution of Problems in Materialism and Culture is its exploration of the role of culture in social change. Williams challenges the idea that culture is merely a reflection of social structures, arguing instead that it can be a force for change. He suggests that cultural forms have the power to challenge dominant ideologies and inspire new ways of thinking. For example, literature, art, and media can expose social injustices, inspire empathy, and foster solidarity among marginalized groups. However, Williams is also mindful of the limitations of culture as a tool for social transformation. He recognizes that cultural change is often constrained by the economic and political structures that maintain the status quo. Despite these limitations, he remains optimistic about the potential of culture to contribute to social progress, provided it is rooted in a critical understanding of material conditions.